Quiz.
We ask the questions.
What is needed in the world?
Is that going to
He may have a name and face unknown to many outside of the Olympic movement, but Thomas Bach is in possession of one of the most powerful jobs in world sport. In September of last year, Bach was voted in as president of the International Olympic Committee.
Thomas Bach.
The German is only the 9th person to ever hold this position, and he's the first IOC president to be a former Olympic gold medalist, winning as he did the team foil fencing title at the 1976 Montreal Games. He subsequently emerged as an eloquent spokesman for his fellow athletes. Bach was a vocal opponent of the West German boycott of the 1980 Moscow Games, determined then, as he is now, that sport shouldn't become an instrument of politics. His skills as a lawyer and experience as an athlete helped him excel in various roles within the IOC and saw him defeat 5 rival would-be presidents at last year's election.
I want to lead the IOC according to my motto, unity in diversity. I want to be a president for all of you. Now, my dear friends and colleagues, let us, this great universal orchestra, the IOC, play together in harmony for a bright future of the Olympic movement under the leadership of the IOC. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
His predecessor Jacques Rogge did much to restore the credibility and financial strength of the IOC following high-profile corruption scandals. Bach is tasked with ensuring the Olympics remain relevant and engage with a new generation of viewers and athletes. A man still assessing his new role's powers and limitations as he sits down to talk to Al Jazeera. Thomas Bach, President of the International Olympic Committee, thank you so much for talking to Al Jazeera. You've been in your job just a matter of months. What has surprised you most about that job in that short period of time you've had, effectively becoming the most powerful man in Olympic sports?
I think it was a very good surprise to see that there is so much support and sympathy for the plans I have. I expected a good cooperation, but now you can even feel more, and there I feel very positive about it.
Effectively, though, you've gone from being the backing singer to the lead singer now. How are you? Are you comfortable in that role out in front?
Yeah, you know, nobody forced me to run for office, and I know from my experience what this office means, and so I'm happy and I'm really enjoying it because it gets you close to sports and close to the athletes. And thereafter, the great success of the Sochi Games, I even feel more comfortable than before.
The Sochi Winter Olympics and all its attendant controversies ensured Bach was offered no gentle emergence into the job. Several world leaders shunned the Games, unhappy then with Russia's recently introduced law banning what it described as gay propaganda. The Olympic Charter is officially against discrimination of any kind. Could you choose to only take the Olympics to countries which broadly agree with the Olympic Charter? I mean, there was the obvious example in Sochi of people being unhappy about the anti-gay laws that were introduced there. Now, admittedly, that was after they'd already won the bid, but let's say that those laws had been in place years ago.
Yeah, but there again, you know, maybe this Olympic message of non-discrimination, of tolerance among people, of understanding, of respecting the rules. Maybe this kind of message is even more important in countries where this does not go without saying. And you have seen what has been achieved in Sochi. There, President Putin and the Russian government have given us the assurances before the Games that there would be no kind of discrimination there during the Games. And you see what happened. They delivered, and there was no discrimination in the Games. And I think this is a very positive message to the society in Russia and to the worldwide community.
You mentioned politics. You've said ideally you'd like the IOC to be politically neutral without being apolitical. What does that mean? Because in my experience, governments have long used sport and Olympic sport to try and legitimise their countries and their regimes in the eyes of the world, and they use sport for doing that, don't they?
Yeah, and we are ready to partner up with countries, and I think this is legitimate and is good for sport that people understand that with athletes, with successful athletes, with sports, you create sympathy around the world, and that the athletes are maybe the best ambassadors of your country. This is very much welcome, but in order to have this sympathy for the athletes, in order to bring the Olympic message across, and the Olympic message is the message of the building bridges among people, and not about erecting walls. It is to show that you can compete with each other, and the same rules are applied for everybody all over the globe, and you can still, while competing, you can understand each other. This message you can only get across when you're politically neutral, because if you allow this to become political, then it becomes antagonizing. Then you create disputes. You create more quarrels than you create a common understanding, and this is why the Olympic movement has to be neutral politically. At the same time, we have to know that our decisions may have a political effect. We have to take this into consideration, and we have to cooperate in a partnership level with the political authorities. That's what the IOC, for instance, is doing with the United Nations, where we enjoy the status as permanent observer, and the United Nations is respecting the autonomy of the IOC fully.
You mentioned there you're obviously a former athlete. You're the first IOC president to be an Olympic gold medalist. How important has that been in shaping your philosophy and your approach to this job? Do the athletes always come first?
It is shaping your life. This is not only shaping now my attitude to this office. It is shaping your life. There are two sayings. One says, "Once an Olympian, always an Olympian." So sport is educating people. It brings a lot to your life. It makes you more confident. It teaches you fair play. It teaches you to handle defeat and to handle victory, both with dignity. It teaches you many things, and therefore I'm happy that now I can give back to sport something, and in the same time the experience helps in communicating with the athletes, because there's another saying, I think, which is true, and it says Olympians are speaking the same language. So it's much easier really to communicate with athletes when they know that they have somebody there with them who shares their experiences.
Do you think that message is getting across? Do you think there's still an element of cynicism from the wider public about it, what exactly the IOC does as opposed to what the athletes do? They can see clearly what the athletes do. They're probably less sure about exactly what the IOC does.
Yeah, but this is always like this, that the wider public does not consider very much what organizations or companies are doing. Let's say in a manufacturing company, you see the product you're holding in your hand, and you do not think what it means to manufacture this product. And it's a little bit with the IOC and in sports organizations. When I was an athlete, I didn't have a clue what the IOC is doing. There, I think for us it is important that to communicate, to make the offer to the public with all transparency that they can get the information about everything we are doing, and then making their own judgment. And once we are getting this message across, then I'm not concerned because we have a very good story to tell.
How important is it for you to ensure that the International Olympic Committee and the Olympic movement generally stays relevant and stays relevant to young people as well? Is that one of the important things for the movement moving
of course.
forward?
So this is our future. If we lose relevance, if we lose the contact to the youth, then one day we would disappear. And therefore, it is very much important that we get contact to the youth, but not only in a way that they are just watching sports and loving sports, but that they are playing sports, that they are practicing sports. And this also is very much important because sport and practicing sport is a great contribution to education, is a great tool to spread social values in communities. And from this then also comes the relevance to show the important part sport can play in making a society better and more cohesive.
Bach says athletes will be his #1 priority for the duration of his initial 8-year term. Central to that ambition is the fight against doping. The Sochi Olympics were the most drug-tested Winter Games in history. Global doping laws mean Bach's desire for first-time drug cheats to receive lifetime bans isn't possible, but from next year, initial suspensions will be increased from 2 to 4 years. And as a former athlete, does that double your efforts to try and ensure you have a clean games and doubles your efforts in the fight against doping?
The fight for the clean athletes is one of our top priorities, and this is why one of the first decisions I took after my election was about this fight for the clean athletes. First of all, we increased the number of pre-competition tests for Sochi by 40%. And had a higher quality of testing. And secondly, we established 2 funds of $10 million each. That means a fund for 20 million for the fight for the clean athletes, 10 million reserved for strengthening the fight against doping with a particular focus on research, and another 10 million for the fight against any kind of manipulation and related corruption in order to protect the clean athletes.
At the moment, first-time offenders do not get life bans. It's something you've spoken that you would be in favour of. I mean, how does it make you feel when you see an athlete who has failed a test in the past win an Olympic medal?
You have to accept that everybody deserves a second chance. And actually, I'm coming from this life ban in my times as an athlete and as a president of an athletes commission at the time. But you have to accept that everybody is deserving a second chance. Therefore, I think what we have achieved now, that with the first infringement you may get then 4 years suspension, and with the second one you can already get a lifelong suspension. That this is something which has enough deterrence also for others.
Jamaican athletics it's been one of the huge successes of the Olympics in recent years. Very disturbing reports from Jamaica, one of their former executives from their anti-doping agency saying in the build-up to the London Games there was virtually no out-of-competition testing. That must make you very concerned that such a high-profile team didn't seem to have the correct testing procedures in place.
Now, there we were, of course, concerned, and this is why we took contact there with the World Anti-Doping Agency, WADA, which is responsible for then also handling the tests. And we were advised there in the same time that there may not have been sufficient tests on the national level, but that by the international federation, the International Athletics Federation, there were tests, and that there were also a number of out of competition tests, so that you have to see both sides, the national tests and the international. And then now in the follow-up, there was a WADA commission dealing with this, and we have the full confidence that now their things will be put in order, and that at the same time the International Federation is continuing its efforts in this fight for the clean athletes.
Do you have the confidence that the cheats are being caught now?
Yes, there all the experts, are telling me that we're maybe with regard to some substances or some methods, we're not yet there where we definitely want to be, because we would like to be ahead if possible. But the experts are telling me that we were never so close as we are today. And just in order to close this gap, we have established this $10 million fund to have better research, and we are inviting the world governments who are sharing the responsibility for WADA with the Olympic movement, that they are matching this $10 million, so that altogether we could have $20 million for even making faster progress.
Match fixing and illegal bookmaking is another thing you've spoken of, and another thing you've said you're very concerned about. What realistically can the IOC do?
We're already doing a lot, and we're making further efforts. First of all, when you take part in an Olympic Games, you're not allowed to place any bets on the competitions in the Olympic Games. In the same time, we have established a monitoring system which is monitoring all the bets being placed for Olympic competitions. Then we have established an own position and integrity system within the IOC, where we are working very closely with the international federations, for instance, with the International Tennis Federation, which has a great experience in this respect, and also many other international federations. And then we have, just before the Sochi Games, we have signed a memorandum of understanding with Interpol, so that they can assist even better, because this illegal betting is an international crime, and therefore we need the close cooperation of the international police forces.
As you say, the IOC can't impose laws. I mean, how useful is it having partnerships with sporting federations? Because obviously it's individual governments that need to really crack down on illegal bookmaking within their own borders.
That's the difference to the fight against doping. In the fight against doping, you have tests, you have the principle of strict liability, you have international recognized arbitration. With regard to illegal betting, we do not have this means, and this is why in this fight we need a very close cooperation with the government on two sides. I think the first step has to be with regard to police forces, with regard to investigation, and then, but this may be politically wishful thinking, but the ideal step would be to have harmonized legislation on illegal betting, there on an international level. But knowing politics a little bit, I also know that this is, to say diplomatically, very difficult to achieve.
Bach was talking to Al Jazeera during a visit to Doha, capital of the Gulf state of Qatar. Already a future host of the Football World Cup, Doha has twice failed in efforts to land the Olympics, but has vowed to carry on bidding. It's a potential venue that challenges Bach's stated desire to embrace diversity. I just want to ask you a couple of quick questions about Qatar. Homosexuality, for example, is illegal in this country. That is something that is against the Olympic Charter, which stands for non-discrimination. Will that count against Qatar's efforts to host the Olympics?
Now, again, the responsibility of the IOC is to ensure the application of the Olympic Charter in the Olympic Games. This is what we are standing for. We are not a supranational the government or a super parliament, who can rule or overrule a sovereign state. What we are standing for is ensuring the application of the Olympic Charter in the Olympic Games, and this we did in Sochi, and this is true for all the host countries and host cities, and also for all the future host countries and host cities. They have to accept the application of the Olympic Charter in the Games and for all the participants of the Games.
The Olympics going to South America for the first time in Brazil. During your presidency, would you like to see a first Olympic Games in Africa or in the Middle East?
We are a universal organization, and of course we do not want to have white spots on the map when it comes to organizing the Games. These the bids are very much welcome, and then it will be up to the IOC members to see whether they're feasible, whether it's the right moment. This is a worldwide the competition, and the IOC has to ensure an equal playing field for all these candidates. But I'm sure that the IOC members would have great sympathy for bids coming from regions where the Olympic Games have not yet been organized.
My final question, the weather in Qatar, does that rule it out for Summer Games?
It's beautiful weather today. There's not one argument does not the rule out, and I think now it's also too early to speculate about potential future bids. We are now in the bidding process for the Winter Games 22, and with regard to Qatar, the focus of the world is on the World Cup. Then also in 22, and once the bidding for the Winter Games is over, then we all together can turn our attention to 24, and then also to the future 24, 28. We will see. The Olympic Games is a too important and too complex a project than to speculate about it at a pre-major time.
Thomas Bach, President of the International Olympic Committee, thank you so much for talking to Al Jazeera.
Thank you, my pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.